Welcome to the Pure Prison Podcast, a Society First production. My name is Shai Hillman. Before we begin, we want to give an introduction of our goals, and that is to provide a platform that identifies both the problem and the solutions to the criminal justice system. The purpose behind Pure Prison Podcast is to give a voice not only to those who have been impacted by the system, but also to those who are positively impacting the system. Society First wants to ensure that all guests feel free to express their thoughts and beliefs. With that being said, not all views and beliefs of those interviewed are necessarily the views of Society First. With that, we hope that we will inspire you to get involved, for it's only together that we will make a difference. Welcome back to Pure Prison. Thank you for joining us once again. And tonight we have Lynn Espejo in our studio. She's going to be informing us about a current topic, the CARES Act. I know that a lot of you out there don't know exactly what that was, but just so you are aware, a lot of people were released under this act, and now there's a possibility of them being sent back to prison. So she's going to join us right now and introduce herself. Hi, Lynn. How are you tonight?
Hi, Shai. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then explain the CARES Act to the audience, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lynn Espejo, and I am founder of Inside the Walls blog and Inside the Walls and Beyond Facebook page. I am a prison advocate, and I also have a master's in clinical and mental health counseling. The CARES Act was the act that was put into place during COVID that actually allowed me to get out of federal prison just a few months early. I was due to get out regardless in 2020, but that act allowed me, as well as many other incarcerated people, to be released early due to the threat of COVID running rampant throughout the prison system and trying to social distance people by getting the head count to a number that the Federal Bureau of Prisons says they were able to social distance and also keep people hopefully safe from COVID. As we know, that never really happened because the COVID has ran rampant throughout the prison system. However, many people were released and avoided getting COVID due to the fact that the CARES Act did come into play. And that is an act that Congress put in April of 2020. I was released, as I said, under that act, and I came home in May of 2020. There is roughly 4,000 released individuals under the CARES Act that are still on home confinement and wearing a monitor or some other monitoring device. And those individuals are at risk of being taken back to federal prison. This is because at the end of the Trump administration, there was a memo that came out, and that memo actually instructed that once the pandemic was over, that those individuals would be taken back to federal prison.
What? Okay, so let me get this straight. Now, 4,000 people, that's a lot of people.
If that number, it may be a few over that, but that's the rough estimate right now, that out of the people released, there are still 4,000 that are under this act that are at risk of being taken back to prison.
And this was for federal inmates only, correct?
Correct. Okay. Now, state did let out a lot of people to get the numbers down, but that was at a state level. The CARES Act did apply to those who were serving federal prison time.
Okay. And so right now, the memo, I don't understand, was the memo was let out during this since Biden has been elected?
No, at the end of the Trump administration, okay. It's called the OLC memo if people would like to Google it or look it up. But at the end of the Trump administration, his administration put the memo out. And there's been a lot of controversy on that. And everyone that is trying to advocate for this is asking that Biden please rescind the memo, grant clemency to the people that are out under this act, or do something else, Congress, somebody, to prevent these people from being taken back to prison. Now, mind you, many people that were released under this, many who at least several that I'm even advocating for at the moment, have been taken back for minor violations. And as you remember, I was also taken back from the CARES Act for a minor violation back in January of this year.
Yes, I wanted to mention that. I literally just had a wave of goosebumps go over me. I had a very insignificant thing happened to me, and I was still incarcerated. I went to Bradenton Bridges, and they closed, and I had to go back to prison after wearing my normal clothes, and I literally got them again. It was horrifying. I can't imagine being released, going home, reuniting with your family, your children, your loved ones, getting a job.
Yes.
Oh my God, tell us
getting housing, getting vehicles, reestablishing family ties. Some people even got custody of children that they had left behind with caretakers when they had to report or were taken into federal prison. So these are people that have basically reestablished their entire life. They were never told that they would be taken back. Nobody told them that, hey, you're out today, but guess what? You might go back when the pandemic dies down. No, that was not told to people. And on top of it, many people are struggling with the impact of incarceration on their mental health. I know I've struggled with that, with anxiety and PTSD. They may be getting treatment for that. They're not going to get that once they're taken back. And, some of these people have been home more than a year now. So they have lived more than a year in the free world, following all the rules of the halfway house, following everything they've been asked to do. And let me tell you, wearing an ankle monitor and being called multiple times a day and all night long, and just the stigmatism even of that in and of itself is bad enough.
Yeah,
that's not even about. Yes, we're talking about people that have literally, some people have reestablished marriages and like I said, custody of children. It is egregious to think that we would actually want to pluck those people back out of society when they're doing well. And by all accounts, even Director Carvajal, the director of the Bureau of Prison, testified before Congress that it's been a successful program.
Wow.
Why would we do this to these people? It makes no sense.
I'm just.
And SAM and other organizations are actually advocating against it. They are begging Biden to do something. The Biden administration. The hashtag Keep Them Home has been circulating on Twitter and other social media. And that hashtag, and I hope your listeners will start using that and begging the president and Congress and powers that be to please keep them home.
Hashtag Keep Them Home. We've got it on the bottom right now, guys.
Yes.
I cannot stress enough to the listeners. I know that we have a lot of our audience who are formerly incarcerated. They understand the gravity of this. People who have family members that are coming home. If you have not ever, I can't explain how horrendous this is, and not to be told that this is a possibility, so you can brace yourself emotionally, so you don't plan for things that could come to a very sudden halt.
Such as leases into apartments and houses.
Wrecking your credit again. Your credit. Oh my goodness. I want you to tell
us. A car to get to work.
I know.
You've got a payment. Obviously, you can't afford to pay cash, or at least I would suspect 9 out of 10 people cannot that came home.
Right. Now tell us a little bit about what happened to you personally. And then I need our audience to hear about the women and the people that you're advocating for, because like we said, this is a This is a hot topic, but this is a serious topic, and this is a need to be dealt with now topic. So please.
Well, back in December of 2020, well, let me back up for a second. When I was in federal prison, I actually ran a blog called Inside the Walls, where it started out with me blogging about my experience and frustration with the federal injustice system. I call it injustice because I haven't seen much justice in it. But with our federal criminal system, because I was indicted, went to a jury trial, was found guilty of a crime I knew I had not committed. So the blog really just started about my feelings about going through that process. And then I carried on it over into prison so that I could mainly it was to keep family, friends that followed my blog up to date kind of on what I was going through as I journeyed through the federal prison system. That soon turned into a little bit more. Once I got to the BOP and saw how things operated, saw how, for lack of a better word, crooked, just plain and simple, crooked the system was, how staff were very fraudulent and mistreated inmates, violated their rights. Prisoners really get treated probably worse than many animals that we advocate for not to be mistreated. But yet I don't see a lot of people speaking up for the mistreatment of humans that are incarcerated and that are serving time being mistreated like this. But my blog turned into more of an advocacy for what I saw is more than a broken system, a system that actually incarcerates individuals and then treats them in a way that was damaging to mental health, damaging to family ties, not doing anything to rehabilitate individuals that were caught up in the system, and certainly not doing anything to help anyone that was in prison for drugs. Because as you all know, those kinds of things can be gotten easier or as easy in prison as they can on the streets. So I started advocating and calling out what I saw as the broken system. The BOP took great offense to my blog. The first time I knew that they were reading it was when I blogged about the corruption at the BOP was the title of the blog. And I was called in and I was given an incident report saying that I had circumvented the email system by emailing my blog to an approved contact, my friend Kathy, who then posted it on the internet for me. I fought that incident report and also let the BOP know that if they did find me guilty of that I would be filing a civil lawsuit because they were going to be violating my First Amendment rights to free speech. Well, as it ends up, that incident report was quickly thrown out after they found out that I was not going to go away quietly. And of course, I continued to blog during that time, even about the incident report and how my rights were being violated. Later, what caused me to blog about what I saw as fraudulent behavior was the fact that I was put out of the cosmetology program at FPC Bryan for refusing to sign paperwork or go along with the fact that FPC Bryan staff was reporting fraudulent cosmetology hours that I had not gotten to the state of Texas on my behalf. And I fought them for 3 months, and they made a deal with me to allow me back into the cosmetology program if I would somewhat shut up about it. And so at the time, I went back into the cosmetology program. However, I am now cooperating with the state of Texas on an investigation into that fraudulent program since I am home. TDLR, which is the licensing registration board in Texas, has asked me to cooperate, and I am doing so. But anyway, that got me on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, with staff at FPC Bryan. Eventually, I was shipped to Oklahoma to the transfer center, the federal transfer center. And that was a result of my blogging and reporting FPC Bryan compound staff PREA violations. Now, that's the Prison Rape Elimination Act.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, the BOP was not a fan. And in December of 2020, while I was under CARES Act through the halfway house being monitored on an ankle monitor, I went and blogged about a mobile billboard that was circling. It was circling the prison compound at FPC Bryan, and the billboard had been hired by a nonprofit. And it was encouraging the warden at Bryan to allow women to call home for Christmas because they had been blocked at Thanksgiving and were being told they were going to be blocked at Christmas from reaching out to their children and families, to say Merry Christmas or what have you. And this is because the warden was apparently blaming the inmates, the prisoners, for being responsible for the COVID coming into the federal prison. However, the federal prison had been locked down since March. We're now all the way into December, and no visits had happened. So, everybody's like, why is it the prisoner's fault? This is clearly staff has brought the COVID into the institution. So the mobile billboard was trying to bring attention to that matter and was hoping to persuade, for lack of a better word, the warden to allow these phone calls, which it did end up doing. However, I had got a picture sent to me from someone who had witnessed the billboard and wanted it reported on. And so I blogged about it, and I tweeted that blog out on my Twitter account. Piper Kerman, who wrote Orange is the New Black and is responsible for helping with the Netflix series of that same title, at the time tweeted that blog post. Well, as you can imagine, because of her tweet, that blog post went viral, and FPC Bryan staff were not a bit happy about it. So the SIS person at FPC Bryan sent an email to my future, mind you, probation officer, and let her know, along with the link to my blog, and also told her that I was communicating with prisoners that I had left behind through the Core Links, which is a BOP monitored email system. So she didn't know what to do with it. First of all, she was not even over me at the time. And secondly, she did not see that I had done anything wrong. So she forwarded that email to my case manager at the City of Faith halfway house in Little Rock, Arkansas. And my case manager, Miss Shannon, she called me to discuss the matter. She asked me if I had paid for the mobile billboard. That was the accusation at the time by FPC Bryan staff. And I informed her no, that I had not. However, I questioned what would be the issue if I had. What rule am I breaking if I hired a mobile billboard, freedom of speech, to circle the federal prison to bring attention to the plight of prisoners who are not receiving holiday phone calls? She couldn't give me an answer and didn't know of any rule I had violated. She then asked me about my blog. And I told her, yes, I did blog, and that I will continue to blog because I had already received an incident report while in federal prison, and I had already won that. And the BOP was well aware that there was no violation of me blogging. So she didn't know what to say to that. I asked her, was I violating a rule? And she didn't know, really. She didn't think so, but she didn't know. So then she asked me, had I been communicating with prisoners that I had left behind? And I told her, yes, I had, that I had been communicating and also sending cards to those that I cared about and had met and left behind. And she told me I could no longer do that. So when she told me I could not do that, I had also been doing a radio show called Inside the Walls and Beyond, where, probably 99.9% of the individuals that came on to talk were also prisoners or, and convicted felons like the rest of us, and was out, a lot of them even on the CARES Act. And they were coming on my radio show to discuss issues. And we even actually had people that were still behind the walls, still incarcerated at FPC Bryan, that had called in and talked with us on that show at least once or twice. And she said, what radio show? When I asked her, well, how's this going to affect my radio show? And she was like, what radio show? And I told her. And she said, well, I don't think you can do that. And so a few days later, before my next time I was supposed to be on the radio show, I, got back with her. Like, what did you find out? Like, I'm supposed to do a show this Friday and I need to know, can I do this show? And so she said, well, let me see what I can find out. So she talked to the RRM manager, Sean Smith, who is at the RRM in Dallas. That is the part of the BOP in my area that is over the halfway house that I was under. So Dallas, my halfway house is under the Dallas RRM, and so he advised that I was under no uncertain terms to do the radio show. So I pushed back and I provided them with BOP policy that showed I was not violating anything and that I, in fact, could speak to media, be on whatever, news media, be part of the media, whatever, and that there was no prohibition to me doing so. I also brought up the Michael Coyne case, which, a federal judge ruled that as a condition of halfway house, they could not hold him to not be able to put out his book, to talk to news media, and I felt like that case went directly with what I was saying was, a federal judge in New York has already said the BOP cannot hold this as a condition of home confinement.
Wow.
Obviously, they were not moved because they told me I could not do my radio show. So I told them that I would start administrative remedies, which is what you can do as a grievance, sort of, to argue your points within the BOP system. Because when you're on the CARES Act, you're still under the BOP. You still belong to the BOP. You still are under their, purview or whatever rules they want to have for you. And so that was on a Friday. On Tuesday, I received a phone call from the director, Mr. South, Michael South of the halfway house in Little Rock, told me to report within 2 hours back to the halfway house to bring all the equipment that charged my ankle monitor, that I was being taken back to prison and being violated from the CARES Act. So my husband and I, went over to the halfway house. They cut off my ankle monitor. The U.S. Marshal came. They shackled, handcuffed, all the things they do me, and they took me out to the Pulaski County Jail. However, the BOP may or may not have been aware that in December of 2020, now mind you, that was January of 2021 when that happened, January the 12th. But in early December, on December the 1st of 2020, I had amended my compassionate release motion that I had filed when I was still at the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma during COVID. And I amended it to request that I be allowed to get off the ankle monitor and go directly to supervised release. Part of the reasons that I gave was that I wanted to finish my master's in clinical and mental health counseling in the spring semester. I had to do an internship, and I could not do that wearing an ankle monitor because I had to work with patients in a medical setting, and that just wasn't going to work. Also, since I've been home, like I told you, when I was in Oklahoma, I was housed I was in solitary confinement for roughly 100 days because I was locked in my cell 47.5 hours out of 48. I was allowed to be out for 30 minutes for shower and email, phone, whatever you wanted to do, every 48 hours, 30 minutes. And sometimes we went, 5-6 days without getting out. But when we were let out, it was only every 48 hours. And so I had been in that situation for roughly 100 days. But the last 14 days, they had moved me to the men's max security SHU for quarantine with men present in adjacent cells that could yell at me, hackle me, say sexual explicit things to me, make threats to me when I didn't want to talk to them. These were men that were actually in the solitary housing unit, in that unit, for behavioral issues, for not being able to be placed in general population because of their violation of policies, rules, behavior issues, whatever the case. And so that's where I was placed for the last 14 days of my incarceration. And I suffer from, post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety because of what happened to me while I was incarcerated, all the trauma I experienced while incarcerated. So I had also been asking for months, and I had done it in writing. After a while, I started doing it in writing. At first, I was just asking verbally to my case manager if she would, get me some counseling. Well, after a while, I started writing letters to her that said it. And so I provided those letters to the court to show them that, while I'm asking for counseling, I have not been, afforded that ability by the BOP. And so at the time, the court, the way it works, if you're on federal supervised release, if you don't have insurance that covers counseling, you can pay a $10 copay and see the court-approved counselor. And so I was asking, if I could get on supervised release for several reasons, but that was the two main ones. And I had refiled this at the 1st of December of 2020. And so while I was out in the Pulaski County Regional Detention Center, living in another COVID situation in horrific conditions, nasty conditions, being moved from cell to cell, nothing being clean, nothing being sterilized, no access to anything to sterilize, no mask. They give you one, and it's a paper one, and you're just expected to wear that, even though we know that after so many hours, those become inefficient. They're not going to protect you. And at the time, I had not had my shot, had not had my vaccine. So I was at risk for contracting the COVID-19 virus. And people were going in and out. Like anybody that gets arrested and brought out there comes into the unit I was in for 14 days, the quarantine unit. And they may leave after a night. They may stay days. They may get booked out there for a long period of time. But whoever is coming in and out of that unit, if you are in that unit, you are being, placed in a situation where you're exposed to them. So I had amended my motion for compassionate release, and I filed an additional letter to the judge during the 14 days that I was, first 14 days I was there, letting her know the conditions I was in. So on the 15th day, I was released because my judge in my case granted me compassionate release on the 14th day of my reincarceration, and she gave the BOP till 3 o'clock the following day to release me. And they did release me around noon or 1 o'clock. So I got out of there. And at that time, I was placed under the supervision, so for supervised release, under the USPO, the United States Probation Office in my district. And so I was very fortunate. There was another lady, 76-year-old Gwen Levi, that was taken back recently. I think she was taken back in June. And she also received compassionate release after being held about a month back in a county situation. I believe she was in the Washington, D.C. area. Don't hold me to that, but that case has been out there and been really talked about. So people can find that if they just Google, grandma taken back to prison. I mean, she's a very enduring lady, and she had already served so much time in prison for a drug charge, a long, long time. And then for them to scoop her up because she was at a computer class trying to better herself, and just take her right back to prison. Unbelievable.
Right. But it's because she didn't answer the phone, right? She didn't answer the phone during her class.
While she was in a computer class, yes. Right. Prior to that, though, what the American public may not be as aware of is that many other inmates have been taken back for what is like minor infractions that would normally cost them a social pass. However, I have a copy of an email the BOP put out in December of 2020 that my case manager at the time, Mr. Shields, sent to me. And that email basically instructs the halfway house, regardless of the severity of the shot, that's what we call it, shots. It's really incident report is the correct terminology for it. But prisoners commonly refer to those as shots. But the email told staff at halfway houses, and I don't know how many halfway houses got the email, but it said it was a BOP directive. So I would assume that means all halfway houses would have to follow it if it's a directive from the BOP. But I'm not sure if that is the case or not. But the directive did tell the halfway house, at least City of Faith, where I was at, that any violation, minor 400 and 300 series shots, all the way up to most severe 100 series shots, incident reports, violations, would be sent to a BOP disciplinary box where those people would immediately be picked up by the U.S. Marshal, taken back to prison. And the BOP does not seem to be following its inmate discipline program statement, to where, prisoners have certain rights when they're accused of something, just like I was talking about when I was accused of blogging as a reason to receive an incident report. You have a right to be heard. You have a right to have a staff representative. You have a right to have a disciplinary hearing officer hear your case, and you have a right to be heard. However, what the BOP is doing is in direct violation of that. They are taking people back. They are not giving them those hearings because, first of all, they're placing them in a setting where they don't even have access to administrative remedy forms or any other Federal Bureau of Prison forms to even appeal what they're doing to these people. And they're not having appropriate hearings that would prevent these people from possibly going back, because they're not hearing their side. They're just finding them guilty, taking away good time days on top of it, giving them extra time that they have to go back to prison for. I've seen anywhere from 27 to 41 days thus far that they've taken from individuals, depending on, I don't know if they're looking at the level of shot, be it 100 all the way to 400. But point being, a 300 and 400 series incident report does not require even a DHO hearing. So normally those are really minor incident reports. And by most halfway house, I know for sure my direction in my manual for residents told me that basically I would have had to receive 3 incident reports before I was violated back to prison. The first one would have even been a verbal warning. The second one, I would have lost like a social pass or some minor, like maybe I couldn't go to dinner or just some kind of pass, couldn't get my hair cut, something minor, couldn't go home for the weekend if you're living at the halfway house with your family, things like that. But never a violation all the way back to prison with good time days taken from you. So this is, a real problem. In March of 2020, shortly after I was released onto supervised release, a lady named Melanie Brandt, she is 60 years old. I served time with her at FBC Bryan. She was out. She was living with her brother. She was paying her part of the bills, working at a call center that she had connection to because of her training with Unicor while she was incarcerated. She had worked many years for Unicor, and she was taken back for a minor violation of placing money on the books of prisoners she met while serving time at FPC Bryan, became friendly with, and wanted to be a kind person and put money on their commissary accounts. And that's why she was violated. It is egregious that they would take a person back to federal prison, take 30 good days time from them, and place them back in a COVID situation, because as we know, COVID is still going through the prison system. It is not completely gone, and it's even ramping back up. I live in Arkansas. We're a hot spot right now for the Delta variant. So it's not that it's gone. It's just that it took a little break for a little while. And so I don't think it's ever fully gotten under control in the federal prison system, for sure. The cases may be either underreported, which we know the BOP does, or less cases than there originally were. Obviously, it's still cases. So they're putting these people back in a situation when she had been home almost a year. She was not violating rules. She was not out not doing what she was supposed to. She was working. She was paying her bills. She had reconnected with family. She had reconnected family ties. So now she is back in prison, and she will have to stay there, I believe, until 2023.
Oh my gosh.
And then in June of 2021, and again, Melanie was in March of 21. In June of 21, around the same time they took Gwen Levi back, there was another, well, no, actually this happened in May of 2021. Raquel Esquivel is 6 months pregnant. Raquel served 11 years in federal prison. She had been out for roughly a year. She had reestablished family ties. She had regained custody of her children. She has 3 children. She had became acquainted and dated and became engaged to a young man that she had been dating since July of 2020. She is now pregnant with their child and is 6 months pregnant. She had a good job since May of 2020. She was released in April of 2020 and immediately did all these things to get her life back together after serving 11 years in prison for marijuana, by the way. And so, yes, for marijuana. And so she had done all this to get herself back into a position. She had a good job at T-Bar Drilling in Del Rio, Texas, where she was the office manager, so to speak, and traveled to job sites. She was traveling on March the 4th, and she does have her boss and a coworker who were traveling with her. They heard her call in to the Dismissed Charities halfway house and to make her report-ins as she traveled between job site to job site on that day. Fast forward to May the 10th of 2021, so over 2 months later, the halfway house calls her back into the halfway house. They tell her she is being violated and give her an incident report for none other than escape. They say on escape. They say on March the 4th that Raquel failed to call in to the halfway house to report movement. However, she provided them immediately with phone records that show she made the calls and with statements from her boss and from the coworker that was in the vehicle on that same date. Yet the BOP was not moved at all. And instead, they took a pregnant woman back to prison, where she is now awaiting transfer to God knows where, most likely Carswell, because that is the medical center for females within the federal system. Carswell currently has active cases of the COVID-19 virus, and it is the same institution where Andrea Circlebear, another pregnant inmate, died of COVID in 2020. So the BOP has now taken Raquel, and they have her waiting at a local in Del Rio, a county lockup, waiting to go back to prison. She had a low vitamin deficiency where her doctor wanted her on extra vitamins because she's 37. She's a high risk pregnancy. She's not getting any of that. She has seen the doctor once, and that was only in the last week or week and a half, and she's been back since May. Okay, and we're into July. And so she finally saw a doctor one time, and she just sits there waiting transport back to federal prison. They did take away from her without a hearing 27 good days. Maybe it was 37. Okay, don't hold me to that, but I will look later and let you know. I think it was either 27 or 37 good days credit time, as well as 180 days of disallowance to go back to the halfway house. So she is going to have her 4th child in a lockup facility somewhere, be it Carswell, Del Rio, wherever they take her, because the BOP has a right to transport her however they see fit. And she is going to have that her baby, and her fiance is very upset as well because he's cut out of this process. He's worried about her and the health of the baby because of the fact that he knows, but from doctor's appointments, that there was at least a vitamin deficiency, and the fact that at 37, she is considered a high-risk pregnancy. It is her 4th pregnancy, which also puts her into a high-risk category. So, we're talking about someone who really did what they were supposed to. There was nothing she did, but the BOP just says, we're not going to care about what you showed us. The halfway house says they don't have your phone calls in a log. So guess what? You're guilty of escape.
Oh my God.
Now let's take the case of Carrie Burroughs. In June, as I was already advocating for Melanie Brandt and for Raquel Esquivel, I get a phone call from another person who was also under the ankle monitor and supervision of the same halfway house I had been at, City of Faith, with the same caseworker, Miss Shannon, that had been over me when I was violated. This person was violated because Carrie was 50 feet from her home residence inside of a trailer where her dog was being housed, the same trailer that sits on a property that is the same plot of property that her home is on. It's basically a storage shed, as if, being used as a storage shed on the property. And like I said, she had her dog living there, and she was feeding her dog and going over and taking care of her dog. And so the halfway house violated her for that. They go on to accuse Carrie of being at multiple addresses on her street that she denies completely and says that the ankle monitor apparently was picking up her at different addresses based on where she was at the trailer or in her parents' home where she lived, because a lot of the addresses were abandoned properties that don't even have a house on them, or the house was abandoned and run down and condemned. And one of the neighbors across the street acknowledged that she had never been on his property, yet his address shows he's directly across the street from her parents' house. His address shows that she was over there for long periods of time. Oh, so again, this person, while she was at the halfway house, Carrie is a diabetic. She's a bad diabetic. She has bad issues with this. She lost a toe because the City of Faith halfway house failed to get her medical treatment in time. And I say them, it could have been the BOP failing to give them permission to get her medical treatment, because I think halfway houses sometimes have to get permission from the Bureau of Prisons to actually, send the person that's on home confinement somewhere. And so she lost a toe. She was in the hospital, had to have her toe removed. Just 2 weeks prior to her being taken from home confinement and placed back in the Pulaski County Jail, the same detention center they took me when they violated me, she was also ankle monitor cut off. Marshall took her, U.S. Marshal, transported her back out to the Pulaski County Detention Center. And she, 2 weeks prior to that, had just got out of the hospital with other issues with her diabetes and her foot, and almost lost another part of her foot. And also the doctor at that time told her that he was very worried about activity with her liver not being correct, and that she could be having some kind of organ shutdown because of the diabetes. Oh, she is in the Pulaski County Detention Center. And as of last week, I've not talked to her this week, as of last week, not only has she not heard from the BOP to have her hearing that she has a right to have, because she too was charged with a 100 series incident report for escape. That's what she was charged. And so she has not had her DHO hearing, and she's not been given any of the medicine she is required to take on a daily basis. And she's been back at the Pulaski County Detention Center since June.
Wow. No medicine.
None.
My mind is just totally blown right now. And I'm really, I hope this is compelling to the audience to start looking at these cases, start being more involved. Lynn mentioned FAM earlier. FAM is a huge organization doing marvelous things and on top of a lot of topics. Look at their Facebook. Look at Lynn's Twitter and there's her Twitter down there. Her blog is here. It's been running the whole time. She's huge on Facebook. Start looking at these. I know that my mind is blown right now. And I'm an ex-offender, and I've seen craziness that happens and probation violations that are just asinine that send people back. This is
Let me just tell your listening on it. It's this. That is not the only people that have been taken back. That's just the ones that I have their incident report and can speak to and know what the incident report says. I am aware of many others that have been taken back, several for what they say were minor infractions that caused them to also be charged with escape. I am aware of a lady that was taken back for what they said was an inconclusive drug screen, which means the lab couldn't say yes or no if she had drugs in her system. It could have been a faulty test. It could have been anything. She should have gotten another test. Instead, she was violated and taken back to prison. She's already all the way back to Danbury. And I've heard of others that for minor infractions, we just saw, I forget the gentleman's name, but it just came out this week in publications that there is a gentleman out in, I believe he was out in West Virginia. He was taken back because he failed to answer his home phone or cell phone when he was asleep. And they sent the sheriff over to the house. Yet the ankle monitor report, these things are GPS, shows he was at home. So they know he never left. Right. Yet he has been violated and taken back. And again, I'm aware of several others that I just can't speak to their specific case because I've not seen their incident report. It's not been made public in any way, but I have been told about it by others who are aware that these people were violated from the CARES Act, and they are now either at a county situation awaiting to be returned to federal prison, or they have made their way back to federal prison at this time.
Holy moly. Okay, Lynn, for the people in our audience who are hopefully going to start listening and they're made aware now, I know that you were talking about people are trying to get to Biden. Are there letters we can write? What should we do? What can we do to help these people and bring them and keep the hashtag, keep them home? What can we do? Who do we need to write?
Tweet out to Congress, tweet out to the president, go over to the FAM page. They have links to things that you can do, that you can send messages to the president and others. Get involved with that organization and others that are advocating. I mean, get on Twitter and retweet what we're saying. Yes. I'm constantly tweeting about this. Many people are out there constantly, on Twitter, letting people know. Get on Twitter. Help us get the word out. Continue to share our, messages on Facebook, our tweets. Yes. Join pages. Come over to my Inside the Walls and Beyond Facebook page. Share those posts. Do what you can to continue to spread the news, share articles. I write for the Midnight Report. I constantly have been doing stories on this subject. Yes. Go out and find those. There's several on Raquel. There's ones on others. There's a news story out there where I talk about the memo that was put out, the email from the BOP directive that I received. I discuss with several people that are on home confinement right now, what the stress of this is doing to them and their families and how they feel daily with this being held over their head. And it's causing lots of mental stress. So go over and read their stories, share their stories, use the Keep Them Home hashtag, be a voice behind this and let Congress and Biden's administration know, and the president himself, that we want them to keep these people home, that society is not better with these people going back to prison. In fact, it's going to hurt a lot of people that have reconnected families, children with their family members. Yep. It is, financially, it's going to ruin a lot of people. And that means, that's not going to help the economy. So let's look at the entire picture here. Like I said, Director Carvajal admitted before the Judiciary Committee of Congress that this program has been successful. So there's no reason whatsoever to send these people back to federal prison to finish serving a sentence when they're doing well in the community.
That's right.
We need more community programs. That is one thing I advocate for. Many people should not ever, especially first-time nonviolent offenders, they should never darken a prison door. Ever. They should be in their communities being helped. And serving their time in a way that does not disrupt families and does not cause additional mental health issues.
Absolutely.
Keep them home. Keep them home.
Keep them home. Lynn, it has been so great having you here. I hope to have you on again to speak about some other things that you're very well abreast of. Again, thank you so much. Thank you. Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you, Shy. I appreciate you bringing this to the attention of your listeners, and I hope that they will spread the word. Like I said, just use the hashtag, spread the word, get involved, and let's be one big voice against this atrocity that is going on with the CARES Act.
All right. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. All right, guys. We've talked about a lot today. This is super serious. Imagine if this was your loved one. I've got it on the bottom. Hashtag keep them home. Let's go ahead and start circling that hashtag. But more than that, please, like Lynn said, go on Pure Prison. Go on FAM's page. FAM is incredible. I really hope if you're listening out there, I can't wait to have you on the show. So check them out. Like she said, just retweeting, just reposting, that could hit people that you never know you'd reach, and it becomes, we have the numbers. I'm always saying that we have the numbers. Let's make Biden, let's make them all aware, Congress, that we see and we know, and we want to keep them home. All right, hashtag keep them home. You guys have a fantastic night. Wow, thank you so much for joining. See you next time. Remember, peace or pain, it's your choice.